One of the reasons I love listening to Pete Docter talk about his approach to movies is because he and his colleagues at Pixar are some of the few filmmakers in the film industry today that truly understand the importance of emotional storytelling. Docter and his friends understand that the reason why we connect to films like Monsters Incorporated, Up, Inside Out, or even the more recent Soul is because they aren't afraid to approach a story in an honest and real way. Pete Docter really has a passion for what he does, and he's not afraid to use his own very personal hopes, fears, and joys to create something profound that his audience can connect to on a deep and truly authentic level. As a result, all of his films are uniquely personal and surprisingly resonant with their audiences. These films feel emotional and real because they are emotional and real. They are pieces of art where the artists are vulnerable enough with us to present their own personal hopes and dreams through their stories. To quote Docter,
"You fall in love with these characters and what you've done, and I think you kind of have to. If you don't, then you haven't fully invested in the story, and I don't think I can really get you to care unless I care."
And today, I wanted to take a closer look at a scene from a film that I think illustrates this emotional approach perfectly. Today, I wanted to analyze one amazing sequence and how it weaves its emotional threads through the larger experience of the story as a whole. The married life sequence from Up. Now, before we start getting into the nitty-gritty of how the married life segment ties thematically and narratively into the rest of the film, I wanted to acknowledge the technical prowess and artistic execution that was required to bring this sequence to life. The artists on this film did indeed create an emotional significance through movie magic that we can truly care about. The fact that Pixar creates such profound experiences out of literally nothing will always astound me. I think Docter put it best when he said,
When you think about it, you're watching an animated film. There are no real sets, no real characters, no real props. Nothing on the screen exists. And yet, if we do our job right, we can make you laugh, feel, and maybe even cry.
The fact that they can create something so human out of something that technically doesn't even exist outside of the confines of a computer screen is astonishing and deserves recognition. Technical artists, we absolutely love you. After all, like I said in my old video on Treasure Planet, this is what animation was always meant to be. An art form that could express the complexity of imagination in a way which live action never could. And Pixar does it so well that you don't even notice they're doing it. You don't even stop to think about it. It's that elusive spark that sweeps you away and allows you to suspend your disbelief and cynicism long enough to enjoy the experience. To quote Docter again,
It was completely preposterous, completely unbelievable, but I knew, based on my experience on Monsters, that if I could just get people to care, then they would go with us on this journey. And so Bob and I went back to our own lives, kind of tried to conjure up what it was that really was important to us, and we put together this sequence, which really became the backbone of the film.
And it truly is. This sequence is the emotional center around which the entire film rotates. If you take it out, the whole film begins to crumble. But with it, the film truly begins to soar. And this is the fun part, because in order to understand how this is accomplished, we get to unravel the tapestry of this film and see the surprising thematic complexity that's woven through the plot. Now, we'll get back to this eventually, but it's important to state up front that everything eventually ties back into the seemingly simple concept of emotional vulnerability and selflessness in relationships. But it's the seemingly simple, seemingly ordinary things like the life events shown in this scene and before it that can be the most profound things in a film. It's funny to me that I glossed over so many seemingly tiny things in this sequence at the time that now hold enormous significance to me when I remember this film. Because
But I think the boring stuff is the stuff I remember the most.
let's start with the contrast between Ellie and Carl's personalities. After all, it becomes the context for Russell and Carl's relationship. Even if it isn't clearly stated, I think these two relationships mirror each other in a way. Russell's presence and prying nature painfully remind Carl of Ellie's exuberance. As Russell tries to lead Carl to be a more outgoing and adventurous individual, we are constantly reminded of how Ellie originally drew that out of Carl. And that isn't the only thing in their relationship that becomes important later. The house that Carl and Ellie fixed up together becomes the very vessel that Carl uses to try and fulfill their shared dream to go to Paradise Falls, as well as a symbol for letting go of the past. More on that later. Of course, Carl's job as a balloon salesman provides the obvious inspiration and means by which he travels to South America. On the most basic level, it's clear that Ellie and Carl's shared experience saving money together for their trip and dreaming together for their future shows us the reasoning behind Carl's journey to Paradise Falls and why it's so important to him. It also establishes the friction that will lead to character growth as the completely different personalities of Carl and Russell begin to clash with each other along their journey. It's crazy because this sequence even establishes the primary character development and emotional journey that will be followed throughout the film. For instance, the shocking discovery that Carl and Ellie's shared inspiration in Charles Muntz is misplaced when Muntz is revealed to be the film's villain serves as a wake-up call for Carl that maybe his obsession with Ellie's dream has gone too far. Muntz serves as a dark reflection of Carl. Muntz's dream became an obsession that consumed him because he was not able to let it go. It's something that Carl seems in danger of falling prey to. It hints at the type of person that Carl could become if he refuses to let go of his grief. And I know this is a bit of a tangent, but bear with me because this is where our wonderful animal sidekicks finally come into play. Doug and Kevin are both extensions of Muntz's character, and as such they act as physical representations of his obsession and what he's missing out on because of it. They also represent the opposite in Carl. For instance, Muntz is obsessed with capturing Kevin and thus separating her from her baby. Thus, Carl's rejection of his obsession, and of the dark path Muntz chose, completes his arc when he finally leaves his house to rescue Kevin and fulfill his promise to Russell. In addition, Muntz, in his dark single-mindedness, doesn't even realize what he's missing out on in the wonderful and undying affection of Doug. He only sees his dogs as tools for executing his obsession, and thus neglects the poor dog. And again, to demonstrate how his arc diverges from Muntz, after making the mistake of rejecting the dog himself, Carl learns to accept and love Doug and show him affection in a way his old master never could. Kevin and Doug influence the story in so many more ways, and are such wonderful characters to talk about. But because this video is focusing specifically on the beginning of the film and its impact on Carl's arc, I wanted to get back to Carl and Russell real quick. It also establishes how significant it is for him to let go of the house, Ellie's dream, and the promise he made to her to keep the one that he made for Russell. Because at its core, Up is a story about processing and overcoming grief. It's a story about a man who learns to find meaning in life again, even after he's lost everything worth living for. And in that instant, when he lets go of the house to go save Russell, he's letting go of the past and deciding to move forward into the future. And that's just the tip of the iceberg in regards to the significance of this moment. For example, the adventure book that Ellie handed Carl before her passing also serves as a turning point for Carl to finally live for something new. It's her way of celebrating their beautiful and simple life, and empowering him to find a new dream after she's gone. To Ellie, their whole life was a grand adventure, and now it's Carl's turn to go out and live a new one. It was never about going to Paradise Falls for her. It was about living life to its fullest with someone that she cared about. It was about life being the real adventure. And that's when Carl finally realizes that he was wrong. He finally realizes that it's time to let go of his grief and forge a new adventure in life. Ellie's long-lost message empowers him to let go of her, and the new adventure that Carl chooses, when he finally stops closing himself off to the outside world and refusing to let go of his old life, is to help Russell and save him from the vengeful clutches of Muntz. And last but not least, in a poetic symmetry that always brings me to tears, the setup of Ellie not being able to have children in the beginning sequence is finally paid off, when Carl is able to experience the one great adventure that he never got to share with Ellie, loving and caring for a child. Through the sacrifice of his dream, Carl becomes a father figure that was there for Russell in a way that his real father never was. No longer bitter, no longer alone, Carl is finally able to process the grief and move on. He is finally able to let go of the haunting memories and live life to its fullest. Even after losing the love of his life, even considering the painful memories that we have experienced alongside him, his journey has shown us that there is always something worth living for. Because we have experienced his grief with him through the magic of visual storytelling, we can also learn how to move on from it alongside him. That's why this sequence is such an amazing example of Pixar's emotional approach, because suddenly we truly care, because now we know how it feels. And what's so profound about this experience is that all of the beauty and emotional power is accomplished from scratch by animators in a medium that technically doesn't even exist outside a computer screen. And it works, because these artists care about it as much as we do. As Pete Docter once said,
If we can learn to care for an inanimate lamp and for characters that don't exist, then maybe there's hope that we can learn to care for the very real people that live all around us every day.
and that's what makes Up so special. It's a masterpiece because it's an incredibly personal story, intelligently executed, that succeeds in reminding us of what really matters in this world. And that truly is an amazing achievement.